I'd ask the senator, isn't it fair to say that the Gang of Six came up with a more balanced approach on which I believe the Senate could find the ground of compromise? What Senator Reid has proposed, I believe, has cuts that the Republicans have supported, maybe not quite enough yet. So maybe we can negotiate.
Let me reclaim my time.
Absolutely.
There are absolutely no cuts in what either Senator Reid or Speaker Boehner proposed into discretionary spending. The spending will rise $832 billion over the next 2 years, 10 years, in the discretionary accounts. Now, only in Washington is that a cut. And quite frankly, I'm willing to work with my colleagues. I've been out there. I say we have to move and eliminate some of these loopholes, that we have to reform the tax code. I'm willing to take the heat from my side on that. I don't have any problem. What I'm not willing to take anymore is a Senate that won't work on the details of the specific problems. And what I'm trying to do is to outline where the problems are. Where's the we didn't do it when we were in charge either, Senator Kerry. There's been a failure of leadership in this country, in this body, to attack the very problems. When we have 47 job training programs and none of them are working well, because that's what we do know, because the very few times they've been looked at, they don't work, and we're spending $18 billion a year and we're not fixing them, the American people got to say, what is wrong with you all? So what we have to do is we have to evaluate the effectiveness of every program of the federal government. We have to limit the overhead costs of federal programs. We've put ideas out there. This is $9 trillion worth of cuts. Not Washington cuts, American cuts. Money you're not going to spend that's less than what we're spending today, not money you're not going to spend that you would have spent more the next year. This is real cuts. Each one of these is in here, backed up by the facts, not biased. You could disagree with where you would make the cuts, but you can't disagree with the facts in here, because all the facts come from the Congressional Research Service, the General Accounting Office, the Office of Management Budget, the President's budget in terms of his recommendations and why, and the CBO. We won't go there. My problem with the Senate is we won't do our work. And we're as guilty. This is not partisan to me. Our country's future is at stake. And when we have two bills, one last night and one today, that are literally lying to the American people when they say cuts, I think it's unconscionable.
Would the senator further yield?
Well, let me finish, if I will. I will give you a chance, and I will yield back to you in a moment. The fact is we won't tell the truth to the American people. And the first truth is if we'll be honest with them, they will understand what the necessities that will have to be brought forward in this country to be able to solve the problems. By denying what the problem is, we will never get the consensus in this country and the embrace of the American people to do what everybody in this body knows is eventually going to have to be done. We will not have a Medicare system that's like the Medicare system we have today in 5 years. It is absolutely unsustainable. We will never be able to borrow the money to do it. We're going to get a debt downgrade no matter what we do. We will not be able to borrow the money. So rather than continue to be dishonest with the American people about the status of where we are, what we ought to do is embrace them and call for the very things that made this country great. The sacrifice of the citizens of this country to rebuild the potential for our future, to recreate a renewal in our country that embraces the things that made us great. A true free enterprise system with a limited government that will actually allow people to be rewarded for hard work of their own blood, sweat, and toil, and get that back and have the government take a fair share of that. On the upside, it should be more. On the downside, it should be less. I agree. The question is will we do it? Will we continue a charade to the American people, continuing to tell them we're going to cut $900 billion out of the discretionary budget when, in fact, we're going to increase it $832. There's only $2 billion difference between Senator Reid's plan and Speaker Boehner's on discretionary spending, and both of them are untruthful to the American people. Both of them take the American people as a lap. and say we can wink and nod at you and we can tell you something that's not true and we can walk out of here saying we spent less money. Well, you're only going to spend less money than what we planned to spend, which was way too much in the first place, which was totally unsustainable as well. So let's just be honest with them. Our deal is we don't have the courage to actually make the cuts that are listed in here. We don't have the courage to eliminate the waste. We don't have the courage to eliminate the duplication. Why? Because every one of these programs has a political backing. And we're politicians. And unfortunately, too often, we're that instead of statesmen. It's time for us, both sides, to lead this country, to lead the country in a vision of here's the real truth of our problem. Now let's have a debate about what should be the #1 priority. How much should we spend on defense? Should we continue to allow contracts that go way overrun? Should we continue to allow requirement creep in contracts, not just in defense, in Homeland Security, in HHS? We have the same problems we have in defense, we have it on all the other big agencies. We buy $64 billion worth of IT every year in this country, and $37 billion of it is wasted. Totally blown. Why? And what have we done about it? Not one thing. Just go look at the high-risk list for the GAO on IT. Every year that happens. The Census Bureau spent $600 million on a device that never worked. There was no penalty for the company that did it. We paid it anyhow. It was a cost-plus contract, and the reason it never worked is because we had requirement creep all the way through. We don't have any grown-ups making the purchases for this country. Nobody with experience. So we're doing the wrong things at the wrong time. What we need to be doing is the right things at the right time for the right reason, considering that we make sure we take care of those that need us to take care of them, and then we demand participation of everybody else. We need to cap the total number of federal employees. Not because we want to, but because we don't have any other choice. And we don't have to let anybody go. Just through attrition, we can downsize the federal government. We waste $15 billion every 5 years on managing properties in this country that we own that they're vacant. And yet we're spending that money on them. But we can't get a real property bill through. How valuable to us is $15 billion? We've got to start paying attention to the pennies and the nickels and the dimes, and we won't do it. Unnecessary government printings, including us. I've been trying to get the elimination of this for 3 years. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars we can save by not printing the copies of this every day that nobody looks to, except I did see my good friend from Illinois actually look at a vote last night. But he could have got it online out of his BlackBerry. The point is we're tearing down trees to print paper we don't need. How much time do I have left?
The senator has 8.5 minutes remaining on the Republican side.
Mr. President, I just asked the senator again. What I'm trying to do is help us get out of this predicament we've got where we got a couple of days before the United States defaults. Now, everything the senator has said is worthy of inquiry, but isn't it true that if we could get, part of the Reid proposal and the Boehner proposal proposes a joint committee that will be structured somewhat like a base closing commission that will require the Senate and the House to vote in expeditious fashion on these kinds of proposals, whatever the joint committee proposes, and if the joint committee doesn't succeed in proposing something, then hopefully either the Gang of Six or the Simpson-Bowles Commission. So isn't the key now to resolving this crisis and not defaulting our ability to be able to come together on a sufficient trigger or some sufficient mechanism that guarantees we're actually going to deal with the things similar to what the senator is raising?
Well, I would not disagree that those negotiations are going on as we speak. I'm not a party to them. I don't know if you are. I suspect the President pro tem is. And we're not going to get to decide that. That's going to come to us for a decision. Look, I worked a long number of months with my colleagues from the other side of the aisle. I put my name on a bill that really doesn't fix it, but it was something to get us moving. It's better than where we are today. I agree with you. But what I would tell you is that's not good enough. We are not good enough yet to where we need to be if we're actually going to solve the problem. Let me just finish going through this. We need to end no-bid contracts in this country. I'll give you a specific example. Before he left here, Senator Lemieux got through the business bill pre-screening of payments on Medicare payments so that rather than we pay them and then go chase the fraud, we got through a bill. That required Center for Medicaid Services to put in a program to look to see if they ought to pay the bill. Now, what did they do? They signed a cost-plus contract for $77 million with a firm that's never done that before and didn't take a fixed-price contract from firms that have already done it before. Tell me how we let that happen. And yet it happened. And when we had testimony in our committee, they said it was a fixed-price contract, only to write back and say it wasn't a fixed-price contract. We need some common sense in our government. I'll finish this up real quick. We need to disclose the text and cost of legislation prior to passage. We need to identify duplicative government programs. We've done that. That's in here. There's hundreds and thousands of them throughout the federal government. We need to eliminate them. We need to mandate congressional oversight. That's where our leaders, I think, have failed on both sides. They haven't mandated the committee chairman have to do the oversight that's required to solve this problem. We need to freeze the size of this government. We can't afford the government we have today. The debate is about what will happen in the future, what will be the revenue increases, what will be the spending increases, but nobody's talking about decreasing the size of the federal government. We can't afford this government. We can't afford to continue to spend the money that we're spending. So I'll close with this. If we continue to be less than straightforward with the American people about what we're doing here, about the Reid bill, just as the reason I wanted to debate the Boehner bill is I wanted to make this point on the Boehner bill. When we call something a cut of $900 billion, just because the CBO says we're going to spend $900 billion less than what we were planning to spend, but still $832 billion more than what we are spending now, that's not a cut anywhere except in Washington. And we ought to admit it. If that's the best we can do, the American people need to know that's the best we can do. But we can't play the games anymore. I have another colleague, I think, that would like to speak, and with the remaining time, I would yield to him. Is the senator from Alaska interested in speaking?
I thank the senator from Oklahoma. It was my understanding that we were bumping up against the vote here at 5:30. Is that correct, Mr. President?
The Republicans have 3 minutes and 15 seconds remaining.
Mr. President, I had hoped to be able to speak at greater length in 3 minutes this afternoon, but the message that Senator Coburn has been delivering here, I think, is so incredibly important. And I want to join in Senator Kerry's remarks in thanking him for being one who has been working to find not a deal, but to find a solution to the issues that we face today. As we have deliberated all day long, there's been a lot of finger-pointing, a lot of blame, and as the senator from Massachusetts has noted, a lot of times it seems as if the comments are just going past one another rather than directed in a purposeful way that would actually make a difference to this debate. We started out this morning with the messages from the leader arguing over who was filibustering. We've all talked about the need to see compromise here, and then we go on to say why we can't compromise. What we need to be working towards is that solution to the problems, as opposed to attempting to cobble together a deal at the last moment that will gain those necessary votes. The one thing that I would hope that we are all working towards is to avoid the default that we all fear, that we've all been listening to our constituents calling us this weekend as we read our emails, as we talk to friends and neighbors. The concern is very real. One thing that we have managed to do on a bipartisan basis here in this Congress over the past few days is to incite fear in the American public, to make our constituents angry, frustrated, and mad. Well, misery loves company. We're angry, frustrated, and mad here, but I would like to suggest that as the hours wind down, we are able to come together as a body here in the Senate and in the House to find that compromise. Senator Isaacson stood on the floor here earlier this afternoon and spoke of the contours of a proposal that worked to integrate the good ideas of several different members, of Senator Reid, of Representative Speaker Boehner, and of the majority or the minority leader here, Senator McConnell. We should be working to find those areas where we agree, because those areas are, in fact, in place. I'm hopeful, Mr. President, that as the Majority Leader comes back from his meetings, he will have some encouraging news for us as we work through these last hours. I'd like to gain some additional time later on this evening to speak more in detail, but I see a Majority Leader before us waiting to speak.
Senator's time has expired.
Mr. President?
The Majority Leader.
Note the absent corner.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. DeMint, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reid of Rhode Island, Mr. Reid of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden.
A quorum is not present. Mr. Leader.
Mr. President, I move to instruct the Sergeant at Arms to request the presence of absent senators and ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander,
And we're bringing you coverage of this special weekend session of the Senate here on C-SPAN 2. A vote call now, bringing senators to the floor. And over on the other side of the Capitol today, the House was in earlier. Members debated the Reid debt and deficit bill. They voted it down 173 to 246, with 11 Democrats voting against it. And the House is out for the rest of the day, back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern with legislative business at noon. That leaves the focus for the rest of the day here in the Senate, and we expect into the early morning hours with a 1 a.m. vote expected on the Reid bill. The bill proposes a $2.2 trillion decrease in the debt and a $2.4 trillion debt limit increase that would allow the government to borrow money through early 2013. Also around Washington today, the president went into meetings with congressional Democratic leaders after the Reid bill was defeated in the House. In the Senate, it will need 60 votes to move forward, but it's not likely to get those votes. 43 Senate Republicans signed a letter last night saying they would not support the Reid measure in the Senate, leaving too few votes to pass that two-thirds vote threshold.
Mr. Baucus.
And we did hear earlier from Republican congressional leaders. You can see their comments in their entirety online at the C-SPAN video library.
Mr. Bingaman.
And we'll continue to bring you coverage
Mr.
of the Senate right here on C-SPAN 2.
Did you vote?
Mr. Blunt.
He got you then. Yeah. Thank you, Tim.
Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. DeMint, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Weinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Carey, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reid of Rhode Island, Mr. Reid of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Bennett, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Boxer, Brown of Massachusetts, Burr, Cantwell, Carper, Casey, Collins, Conrad, Coons, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Graham, Hagan, Johans, Johnson of South Dakota, Kerry, Kyle, Landrieu, Leahy, Levin, Merkley, Murkowski, Murray, Pryor, Reid of Rhode Island, Schumer, Snow, Tester, Udall of New Mexico, Whitehouse. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Ayotte, Coburn, Cochran, Cornyn, Crapo, Enzi, Grassley, Isaacson, McCain, McConnell, Paul, Risch, Vitter. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Rockefeller, aye. Mr. Webb, aye. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Lee, no. Ms. Stabenow, aye. Mr. Cardin, aye. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mr. Blunt, Mr. Blunt. Aye. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden. Aye. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman. Aye. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner. Aye. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin. Aye. Ms. Mikulski. Ms. Mikulski. Aye. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole. Aye. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill. Aye. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio. Aye. Mr. Corker. Mr. Corker. Aye. Mr. Thin. Mr. Thin. Aye. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Aye. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller. Aye. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Aye. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss. Aye. Mr. Chambliss. Aye. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker. Aye. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Lugar. Aye. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders. Aye. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka. Aye. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coates. Aye. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts. No. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Udall, Colorado. Mr. Udall, Colorado, aye. Mr. Shelby, aye. Mr. Kirk, aye. Mr. Toomey, aye. Mr. Barrasso, no. Mr. Sessions, no. Mr. Harkin, aye. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Mr. Portman, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mr. Brown of Ohio, aye. Mr. Begich, aye. Mr. Hoven, no. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch. Aye. Mr. Reid of Nevada. Mr. Reid of Nevada. Aye.
Anyone wishing to vote or change their vote? If not, the yeas are 75, the nays are 20. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President.
A quorum is present.
Mr. President.
The majority leader.
Mr. President, today the Speaker and Republican leader held...
Would the majority leader, could we have a little...
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, the Speaker and Republican leader held a press conference to announce they're in talks with the President and that a bargain to raise the debt ceiling is in the works and is close. Mr. President, members of the Senate, that's not true. I just spent 2 hours with the President, Vice President, and Leader Pelosi, and it's fair for me to say that the engagement there is not in any meaningful way. Republican leaders still refuse to negotiate in good faith. Revenue is off the calendar. No way we can talk about revenues. Entitlements, oh, they're after entitlements. Medicare, Social Security. The Speaker and Republican leaders should know that merely saying you have an agreement in front of a few television cameras doesn't make it so. The Republican leader at the press event says he's engaged. Fortunately, members of his caucus are, at least as far as I'm concerned, and my members, are more engaged than he is. There are meaningful talks going on with some of his members, with my senators. While the Republican leader is holding meaningless press conferences, his members are reaching out to me and other members, as I've just indicated. They're coming forward with thoughtful ideas to try to move the process forward. I welcome their ideas and ask all members to continue these discussions. America is watching us, and they're demanding a result that's balanced. I say to my friend, and he is my friend, the Republican leader, I'll come to his office. I will go to the White House with him. I will do anything that I can do to try to move this process forward. But I say, as respectfully as I can to my friend, the senior senator from Kentucky, the process has not been moved forward during this day.
Mr. President.
The minority leader, the Republican leader.
Mr. President, the fact of the matter is that the only way we're going to get an agreement before Tuesday is to have an agreement with the President of the United States, the only person in America of the 307 million of us who can sign something into law. And I'm more optimistic than my friend, the majority leader. We've both talked to the President today. We've talked to the Vice President several times. I think we've got a chance of getting there. What I think is not helpful is the process we're going through here on the Senate floor, having show votes over live quorums, having a reluctance on the part of the majority to have a vote on a measure they favor, which we've been prepared to vote on since last night. Look, we need to be in a position where all of us in the leadership can come back here and say that we think we've reached a framework of an agreement that we can recommend to our members and be briefing our members. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can reassure the American people that we're going to get a result on a bipartisan basis. And so that's what I'm working on. And I'm not interested in scoring any political points. I'm interested in getting an outcome for the American people. And the only way that can be done is with the President of the United States. And we're going to continue to work on that, get this problem solved, and let everybody in the country know that we're not going to default for the first time in our history. That's how I'm going to spend my time until we get that outcome that I can come up here and recommend to my colleagues.
Mr. President.
The majority leader.
We are here today. We are here today, right now, for this reason. It's spelled F-I-L-I-B-U-S-T-E-R, filibuster. There is delaying tactics proceeding right now They won't allow us to have a vote, up or down vote on our amendment. And this is a filibuster. By any other term, it's a filibuster. That's why we're here. I hope the negotiations go on. We're willing to be as fair as we can, but there has to be something that the President and Vice President Biden and the rest of us think is a step in the right direction. And I guess talking is a step in the right direction, but that's about it. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the matter that we have before us which is amendment number 589, that we have an up or down vote on that. No, as we have all the time, of course, there would be no points of order in effect, and, you know, we do like we do here all the time. I'll have a vote on it right now.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. These are direct quotes from my friend, the Majority Leader. He says, quote, "In the Senate, it's always been the case you need 60 votes. Always been the case you need 60 votes." This is the Majority Leader of the United States Senate. For him to suggest that a matter of this magnitude in a body that requires 60 votes for almost everything is going to be done with 51 votes, that makes no sense at all. I object.
Mr. President.
The objection is heard. The Majority Leader.
It is, first of all, it's unconscionable that Republicans would filibuster legislation to permit a default on our national obligations. Frankly, it's unprecedented. Unprecedented. Since 1962, Congress has raised the debt limit 74 times, including 18 times under President Reagan, and there was never a threat of a filibuster, and it was always by a majority vote.
Mr. President.
The Republican Leader.
Mr. President, I might say I actually cut short a conversation with the Vice President to come out here for this important vote on a live quorum. I'd like to get back to work so we can hopefully solve this problem. And it seems to me, Mr. President, to be a good idea for the majority to decide to allow the vote on the proposal they say they're in favor of. Therefore, I would ask unanimous consent that the vote on the pending cloture motion occur at 6:30.
I object.
Objection is heard.
Filibuster and any other.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, you can put lipstick on it, nice suit, even a skirt sometimes. It's still a filibuster.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I'm glad you're here. We need order.
I am. Mr. President. Mr. President. Mr. President.
Senator from Utah.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Senator from Utah.
Mr. President. I ask for order in the chamber.
Would the Speaker hold for a minute? Would the Senator hold? Senator from Utah.
I ask unanimous consent that I may be able to complete my remarks.
Is there objection? Without objection. Without objection.
Mr. President, later tonight, we will vote on the Majority Leader's bill to reduce the deficit and increase the nation's statutory debt limit. Earlier today, the House of Representatives decisively rejected the Majority Leader's proposal. If I got it right, the vote was 246 to 173. There 13 did not vote, but there were 11 Democrats who voted against the proposal as well. It will be defeated here in the Senate later this evening, or whenever the Majority Leader allows it to be voted on. And it's fine with me, whatever he decides to do. As a substantive matter, I deeply oppose the efforts of the Majority Leader. His plan does not tackle the task at hand. The President would get a $2.7 trillion debt limit increase.
President, can we have order, please? Order.
Would the gentleman Hold for 1 minute.
I will.
Can people bring their conversations to the cloakroom, please? Senator from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. President. The President would get a $2.7 trillion debt limit increase, but less than $1 trillion in cuts. And most of those cuts are gimmicks, budgetary gimmicks. They assume savings from more spending that the President has not requested, and that will be unlikely to materialize. It does not include a balanced budget amendment. And most importantly, from my perspective, it assumes a massive tax increase in 2013 by allowing the 2001 and 2003 tax relief to expire, allowing the AMT to hit the middle-class taxpayers, and allowing for increases in estate taxes that are a small business. And
Senator, yield for a moment.
I'll be happy to yield.
Let's please show our colleagues some courtesy. Will conversations please cease and be taken to the cloakroom? Senator from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me just say that again. And most importantly, from my perspective, the Majority Leader's approach assumes a massive tax increase in 2013 by allowing the 2001 and 2003 tax relief to expire, allowing the alternative minimum tax to hit middle-class taxpayers, something we have not allowed, and allowing for increases in estate taxes that are a business and job killer. But we are scheduled to vote on this bill late this evening, actually early on Sunday morning. Americans might ask, why in the world are we doing this? Republicans were ready to take this vote yesterday evening. This delay in voting does not match up with the asserted urgency of raising the debt ceiling. Yesterday, the Senate Majority Leader stated here on the floor that, quote, the country defaults on its debt at 12 midnight on Tuesday, unquote. Tuesday is August the 2nd. But is this true? What are these claims based on that the Majority Leader is making? Amazingly, we do not know for a fact whether the United States does run short of cash to pay all of its obligations on August 2nd. We were told by the Treasury Secretary way back in May that August 2nd might be a date when Treasury runs out of money to pay our bills. We have seen estimates of the Treasury's cash position here on the floor that came either from a local think tank or from Wall Street financial firms. But Treasury will not give us updated information. That's outrageous. The last time Treasury informed Congress of its estimates of its cash position was in May, when it backed off of a prior guess and extended their estimate of running dry of cash by 3 weeks. Since that last update, I made a simple request of members of the Financial Stability Oversight Council, commonly called FSOC, which is chaired by the Treasury Secretary. I asked for an update on Treasury's cash and liquid assets to be delivered by close of business on Thursday, and I asked for that as ranking on the Senate Finance Committee. I also asked for contingency plans of Treasury and our financial regulators outlining what they will do if the debt limit is not raised or if we face a ratings downgrade on our U.S. debt. Treasury has not responded to this request. It's outrageous. They know what they're going to do. We are told that the nation will fall off of a financial cliff on August 2nd at midnight. Now that's a lot of precision, down to the hour. But is it true? I don't know. The American people don't know. Social Security recipients in Utah don't know, and Treasury won't tell us. And I might add, the rating agencies don't know either. We're being asked to give the President the largest increase in debt limit in our nation's history. Get that. We're being asked to give the President the largest increase in our debt limit in our nation's history. His last one was the largest at that time. We were asked to consider policies that involve trillions of dollars with no effects that will occur over decades with no current information about how much money the government has and expects to have over the next few days and weeks. Mr. President, Treasury told me yesterday that they are working on getting me some information. Yet I still don't know how much money Treasury now has to pay its bills, and neither does anybody else on the floor. We don't know how much it expects to have over the next few days and weeks, or whether Treasury still believes that midnight August 2nd has any particular significance. But the politicians all insist that August 2nd is the date. I am beginning to have my doubts. If that was the case, wouldn't it make sense for the Majority Leader to schedule votes commensurate with this urgency? Why waste more than 24 hours, which is what the Majority Leader did by refusing our offer to vote last night on his bill? It's not going to change the vote. It is not unreasonable to conclude that maybe that August 2nd date is not all that it's cracked up to be. We can't say for sure because the administration, despite my request more than 48 hours ago, has refused to provide Congress with information regarding its cash position. But others seem to think so. Yesterday, Moody's Investor Service stated clearly, quote, "It remains our expectation that the government will continue with timely debt service. If the debt limit is not raised before August 2nd, we believe that the Treasury would give priority to debt service payments and could thus postpone a potential debt default for a number of days." Does Moody's know more than our Treasury Secretary and FSOC that's been specifically set up to help us to understand these things? They've been working on it for months. Why can't they give us the information? This analysis is consistent with everything that my colleague and friend from Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey, has been saying for months. He understood early on that regardless of the rhetoric, there would be no default on August 2nd. The administration is fully capable of prioritizing payments. There's a much more pressing issue than imminent default, a credit downgrade due to the failure of Congress to use this opportunity to take significant deficit reduction measures. That is the real takeaway from Moody's report. Quote, "Reductions of the magnitude now being proposed, if adopted, would likely lead Moody's to adopt a negative outlook on the AAA rating. The chances of a significant improvement in the long-term credit profile of the government coming from deficit reductions of the magnitude proposed in either plan are not high," unquote. That's Moody's. Our debt has become so unmanageable that we face a credit downgrade with consequent higher interest rates if we do not enact a big-time deficit reduction package. Now, this year is our third straight trillion-dollar deficit. Our national debt is $14.5 trillion. And the President's budget would add $13 trillion in additional debt if he gets his way. I don't know about you, but I can't tolerate that. Added to already almost a $15 trillion debt today. I've spoken previously about the debt bubble the nation finds itself in, but I want to reemphasize that point in light of the warnings from ratings agencies that our credit faces a downgrade absent real deficit reduction. Currently, federal debt held by the public equals a modern record of about 69% of GDP, and it's headed to 100%, and we all know it. The Congressional Budget Office reports that current tax and spending law takes that figure to 76% of GDP over the next 10 years, and we all know it's going to hit 100%. If we keep going with what the President's doing, and unfortunately what my friends on the other side are doing. To put that number in perspective, at the end of fiscal year 2008, the debt held by the public reached about 41%. That's less than 2.5 years ago. That was under the Bush administration. 41% compared to 70% today. As bad as the 76% figure is that we will reach according to the Budget Office, President Obama's budget would raise debt held by the public to 87% of GDP by his own actuaries, and I've got to tell you, they've very seldom been accurate or right. They're always low. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, if we continue current tax policy, don't raise rates, fix the alternative minimum tax, provide estate tax relief, and provide for a fix to the physician payment system, that's the SGR, policies supported by clear majorities of Americans, by 2021, debt held by the public will reach no less than 97%, which is precisely what I've been talking about. Now, here's the sticky wicket. CBO projects that the cost of simply paying the interest on all of this debt will rise to $792 billion. And that's if CBO is right, and generally they're on the low side. Or, in other words, 3.3% of GDP in 2021. But what happens if interest rates go up? And they're likely to go up. Currently, interest rates are very low. 10-year Treasury rates are currently around 3.5%. During the past 2 years, this administration has spent recklessly, raising the total debt from $10.6 trillion to almost $14.5 trillion today. And because debt was cheap, the President was able to take on a lot of it. The true cost of this debt was hidden by low interest rates. But what will happen when interest rates rise? What happens if interest rates rise to levels seen during the 1980s or 1990s? Think of my suggestion that these rating agencies of government are always low. Interest rates are going to rise, and the costs are going to rise too. During the 1980s, rates on 3-month Treasury bills and 10-year notes rose to over 8% and 10% respectively. During the 90s, rates on 3-month and 10-year notes rose to 5% and 6.6% respectively. That cost, as laid out by CBO, could be astronomical. Under President Obama's 2012 current budget, the CBO projects deficits for each of the next 10 years, resulting in an estimate $10 trillion being added to this $14.5 trillion public debt, a 100% increase. Under the scenario where interest rates rise to the historical average of the 1990s, the public debt is projected to grow an additional $8 trillion, or a 77% increase. Under the scenario where interest rates rise to the historical average of the 1980s, the public debt would grow $14.5 trillion, doubling in size. This is the real impact of Moody's warning. It is bad enough that President Obama has taken on so much debt that it may result in a downgrade of our credit, but it is even worse that faced with that downgrade, he and his Democratic allies refuse to deleverage. Should we get downgraded for failure to enact a serious deficit reduction package, our debt will only grow larger because increased interest rates will increase the cost of borrowing. We all know about budgetary gimmickry around here, and this place is filled with it, and this economic debt is filled with it. The arguments about the future are filled with it. Americans should be less concerned about the August 2nd deadline than the fact that over the long term our debt bubble runs the risk of becoming a debt spiral that turns into a death spiral for our economy. Mr. President, let me close by making 2 points. First, given the treacherous fiscal waters we are in, Congress and the American people need to know where the U.S. Treasury stands. It is unacceptable that they are being asked to make decisions based on a proclaimed August 2nd deadline with no facts to back it up. I urge all Americans, all Utahns, and all Social Security recipients to get in touch with the Treasury right now and ask them to show us the money. Call Treasury, send them an email, send out a tweet. Show us the money. You have a right to know cash in the Treasury comes from the taxes that hardworking Americans pay. Government is charged with stewardship over use of that cash. Withholding information is a shirking of that responsibility, and I don't think there's anybody on this floor who believes that Treasury doesn't know what they are going to do. And I don't believe any senator believes that they should be stopping the information from coming to us, especially at this time. We should not run Treasury and manage taxpayer resources the way Bernie Madoff ran his hedge fund, by taking in cash and when asked for information, refusing to give it and just saying, "Trust me." I have a simple question. Does Treasury expect to run out of cash on Tuesday, August 2nd? The President and his Treasury Department must answer this question. Which brings me to my second point. It is much more critical that we get a deficit reduction package right than that we adhere to this arbitrary August 2nd deadline. There's one bill that gets that right from my perspective, and that, of course, is cut, cap, and balance. So far, the only bipartisan votes taken by the Congress in this debt ceiling debate are the vote for cut, cap, and balance in the House and the House vote to defeat the majority leader's bills. Those are the only two that are bipartisan. This debate is not over yet. I expect Senator Reid's bill to fail tonight, and then it is back to the drawing board. My hope is that the President will then do what he has so far refused to do, and that is take leadership. Take a leadership role in this debate. Stand up to his base and encourage his party to take real steps to reduce the deficit. I'm not going to hold my breath. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of